Hi everyone, howdy here. It's March the 3rd, 2021, coming to you with finally a new Renne-le-Chateau video. And I just done 9 minutes of it, and I forgot to realize I didn't turn the sound on the microphone on in my headphones. So I've just been talking quite interestingly for 9 minutes and had no sound. So yeah, we're starting again. So today it's cold, it's rainy, it's snowy, and so it's a perfect day to catch up with weeks of emails that I haven't responded to. And I decided I found the folder in my boxes of all the Renne-le-Chateau stuff. I haven't done anything for a while, and I thought today was the day to bring you another installment. Tomorrow I'm going to recommend a channel to you. Really interesting research by a woman very similar to the stuff Michael's doing over at Susquehanna Alchemy. So if you like how he's looking at maps and figures and landscapes on the ground, she's doing a lot of the same stuff, just in a different part of the United States. So I want to have that on a separate day. So I'll put that up tomorrow and let you guys take a look at that. For today, yeah, we're going to look at Renne-le-Chateau, and we're going to look at a few specific. We're going to look at some of the surrounding area because I want you guys to see that again, how big the mystery is, how strange the story of this place is. And we're going to look at specifically Lyon, Carol, Perilos, Girona, Montreal de Sauce, Cuiza, Brainac, Allet-les-Bains, and Mount Bugarch. Two places that were originally in this list to do, but are just they're too encompassing to try to get into this video, to try to keep the video a reasonable amount of time. That is the church and area of Notre Dame de Marcial, which almost needs its own video for it, so immense, and that of Mount Segur. Not only the Cathar connection and the the story from the 1200s there, but its link with Otto Renne, the German in the 1930s who may or may not have been murdered by the SS for what he found or didn't find or whatnot. So those we'll save for another video, but we'll get into all the rest of this stuff today. And again, a reminder that while I've been researching this material for quite a long time, that doesn't mean that I've certainly found everything. I found a small piece of it. I study a lot of different stuff, and this requires, in many cases, a dedication of your entire life to unravel this. So please, somebody, don't just send a comment and tell me, hey, don't you know anything? Don't you research? Yes, I do research. Yes, I'm sharing what I know. And yes, there's lots more to know and discover. So if you want to post additional information, do so in a friendly way, and that's great for all of us. I'm just trying to provide an overview for people to see the depth of this story and how bigger and bigger and bigger it gets as you move further and further and further away from Renne-le-Chateau Church. So let's start today's discussion with another priest. That being, most people think of the four main ones, right? Sauniere, Boudet, Bijou, and Gilles and Gilles. These are the four that tend to be the most focused on. But there's another one in the area, not that far away, and that's Louie de Coma. Now, de Coma was born in southern France in 1822, and he was given special permission to study at St. Sulpice in Paris. And we're going to get into a lot of St. Sulpice as well as we go along in future videos. He entered the Jesuit seminary, generally when the elite at that time shunned the Jesuits. And when his father died in 1855, he inherited a giant estate near La Balou called Carol. And when he took over the estate, he began to renovate it. And a whole bunch of money came to him again through this inheritance of his father. And he began to spend 500,000 francs at the time, more money than Sauniere spent at Renne-le-Chateau, to build giant religious areas both above and below ground. As well as that, there were also various monies from organizations all over Europe that were being sent to assist in his work. And again, no one's similar to Sauniere, no one's exactly sure where all this guy's money came from. The church connects via a long sacred walkway with the Coma family crypt, which is full of tunnels, shafts, vaults. There's a water gorgon out front that guards it, and inside it's very interesting. There's a statue of Jesus turning away from Coma's tomb, very similar to what you'll see in the third degree of Freemasonry. However, the turned head can also be seen as very similar to the early stages, one of the first stages of alchemy. In an oval room in the burial chamber, it has not only a statue of Mary Magdalene, but a floor set up with the Egyptian Ankh. But it's the above ground stuff that's even more wild of what this guy created. He built the 14 stations of the cross, not just like you would have them running around the church. He built them onto the countryside. One of which, the 12th station of the cross, which is the Magdalene weeping at the feet of Jesus, he basically built a life-size chapel, like a giant, massive structure into the landscape. And the other 13 stations were large metal plates that were put in various sort of smaller little chapels along the way. He also built several monasteries, a garden that had plants imported from Palestine. Interestingly, the church and all of the structures follow a very rare northeast alignment, and that line passes all of his structures, including the actual place of his burial, which is not the crypt where the gravestone is, but in an unmarked grave and tombstone in the parking lot. So that's exactly the same as Sauniere, right? Sauniere has the original place he's supposed to be buried, and then they got the place he picked him up and did bury him. So the Coma is exactly the same with that. All that's on the stone that marks his real grave, the Coma, is a pentacle with a Cathar cross. And if you end the line, when the end of this line comes, it comes to his church where it falls on a statue of Joan of Arc. And Joan of Arc, of course, actually I should probably do a video on Joan of Arc, because that's quite a story. Even though it's not specifically related to southern France, in a way it sort of is. And Joan of Arc is so interesting, given that the name, Joan of Arc. So Joan of Arcadia, or Joan of, is Joan a woman who is defending Arcadia or bringing Arcadia to the world? Is Joan battling the Archons? Is Joan, is Joan somehow related to like the Ark of the Covenant, or an ark meaning like a spiritual ark, or a place, a thing of light? So anyway, that's where it ends. His priestly style, the Coma style, was really unique, and it claimed he was obsessed with death and finding ways to give masses in such a way to ensure that all souls would make it to heaven. And he became the leader of something called the Association de Bonne Mort, the Association of the Good Death. The Coma, like Sauniere, was charged with the trafficking of masses, that all of his money came from selling mass to the public, because it seems like nobody wanted to openly explain where he got his money. Interestingly, all of his building projects stop in 1885, the very same year Sauniere takes over at Renne-le-Chateau. De Coma tried to rent out the monastery for a while after he stopped building. By 1890, he was living alone and became known as the Hermit of Carol. And supposedly, of course, he went mad and spent much of his time walking the grounds wearing his dead mother's clothing, so they say, and he died in 1914. Now, what's interesting is what happens after his death, and that is after he dies, he didn't have a will, which was generally quite common at the time. So the control of the estate went to the Bishop of Carcassonne, and nothing was done really with the place. It was kind of abandoned. It was used by some wartime soldiers. They rented it out for some big parties and whatever, until 1956. And in 1956, it is sold to the Barres family under the very specific conditions that all of de Coma's building projects had to be dynamited so that no religious sects could settle there. That was in the sale document. The stuff not just had to be destroyed, not had to be taken out, they had to be dynamited. And they were. Everything, bizarrely, was dynamited. Now, what's so amazing is that so the private church, the gardens, the villas, they were blown up. Much of the location is just a pile of rubble if you go there now. A small crypt grotto remains, which has a statue of the Magdalene and part of the crypt area, that's still there. And Station 12, the one that he built as a giant, that's a giant temple structure, seems like either didn't really handle the blast damage really well, or they didn't use a lot of dynamite on that one particular structure, so it made it through. What's interesting about the year, of course, is 1956 is the same year that Noel Corbu first gets the story of Renne-le-Chateau published in the French newspapers. And this can't be a coincidence. It can't be a coincidence that the Renne-le-Chateau story all of a sudden pops up into the world at the very same time they want Tacoma's stuff dynamited. So we have to expand the story a little bit because I have to tell you that the Stations of the Cross weren't lost, and it may involve some Rockefeller involvement. Just down the road from Corbu's estate is the village of Reynaud, and at this exact same period, its priest was Anton Rousset at the Church of Notre Dame de Reynaud, and the church was very badly in disrepair. So badly they claimed that the local children had to start going to a nearby Protestant school, which angered the priest. In 1892, right at this time period of everything happening all over the place, it's claimed that John D. Rockefeller visited the region, heard of the priest's money problems, and loaned him all that he needed to refurbish the church, which was completed in 1895. Now, given that 1892 is exactly key in the story, and it's the supposed moment money by John Rockefeller is given to one out-of-the-way, nothing church in southern France, one has to look into what this money is coming from, what it's going for, and what the purpose is. But this place of Reynaud links to Tacoma, because in 1956, when the local clergy heard about that this place was going to be dynamited, they went out quickly and removed all of the chapels with the 14 Stations of the Cross, except of course number 12, which was too large to move and, as I say, somehow survived the dynamiting, and replaced them on the hill behind Reynaud Church. And there, the 12th station is just marked by a simple cross. So all of Tacoma's stations are now in Reynaud. They got saved. What's interesting is each station of the cross has a Roman numeral on it. That is except station 13, which instead has regular numbers 7, 9, 8, 1, with the 79 larger than the 81. This could mean it's the date of manufacture, the 7th of September, 1881, but it reminds us of the odd stylized 1738 on Sauniere's wayside altar. If you turn it around, you've got, you'd have 1860, and then it'd be hard to know what the upside down 7 would be. It could be 18, But again, there's so many strange things, like in all parts of the story. But the similarities between the Carroll estate and Renne-le-Chateau have to be presented. I mean, both were priests who received large sums of money from unknown elites. Both renovated a Church of the Magdalene. They both had giant private estates and gardens. Both got money from the Comte de Chambord. Tacoma is no longer in his original burial place, now in the parking lot. Sauniere is no longer in the original resting place in Renne-le-Chateau, but now on his own without Marie beside him in another cemetery. Both priests preferred to preach in their own private church, not the one assigned to them. There's so many similarities that we're almost like we're looking at identical stories in two different locations. Other than Sauniere's stuff hadn't been dynamited yet. So that's one area to look into. Let's look into the town of Perilos and specifically its mythology. So what I now call the Parallos group. Oh yeah, by the way, as you can see, I'm not putting up a lot of images for this video. As you know, I'm fighting a time factor out here of getting so many things done in the house and the farm and the work that has to be done, and image implants into videos takes a lot of effort, just so you know. So I'm limiting them to just a few. You guys are all good at Google searches. There's no problem for you to Google anything you want to get to. If you want to see more and more images of what I'm talking about, I'm just putting in a few here just so that it's you have an idea of what I'm talking about, and you can go further if you want. So we're going to Perilos, and what I'm calling the Perilos group is coming from a researcher named Andre Doucet, who believes he found a 19th century model, which is supposed to belong to Sauniere. And it's a model of holy places in Jerusalem and includes 2 tombs marked Joseph and Jesus. And underneath was a taped envelope, supposedly from Sauniere, giving more information about the model. When Doucet was making a negative copy of the model for himself, he noticed that only in the reverse would he claimed that the area of Parallos was in the layout. And the town of Parallos is now a ruined village in a remote part of the French Pyrenees near the Spanish border. This site was once the main residence of one of the Grand Masters of the Knights Templar. Henry Boudet's first posting was at Durban, which made him responsible for the area of Perilos, and the supposedly great library that it had, as well as the murdered priest Gilles. He had been posted here. Sauniere is known to have traveled many times to this area, seeking out key people to ask if they had documents related to the region. A lot of researchers claim the model is fake and claim that there's nothing in Sauniere's rather detailed account books that could account for any of the supplies needed to map and make this model. But given the key connection that many of the key members of the story have to the location of Perilos, I mean Henry Boudet, the priest at Renne-le-Chateau, and Gilles, these are 2 key members of this. They're showing themselves to be in Perilos. This is an important thing that needs to be checked. And I want to go into just again briefly. You can, if you want to look up Andre Doucet and his stuff, he'll have tons of information on Perilos if you want to go into detail. But what was very strange, it was that this area was given to France by Spain in a treaty in 1632, and there was a stipulation in the treaty that a specific area of this part was to be untouchable, non-transferable, forbidden to cut wood or remove any stones from it. The land could not be sold and had to be preserved and guarded, and the French owners could not use it. This untouchable reason was potentially a center of very specific rituals and secret meetings that could have taken place with all sorts of secret organizations. That in a sense it was like a protected temple area almost. Now Perilos is the home of a very old and important myth of the region, and it's of the great beast Baboas. Supposedly the beast arrived to the region shortly after the departure of the Lord of Perilos for the 8th Crusade, 8 of course being the number of Hermes and Thoth. This crusade is supposed to have occurred in 1270. The beast is described as a monstrous winged snake with a human face, nourished itself during the night on domestic animals, or preferably young children or stray shepherdesses. The royal and religious authorities were alerted, and in spite of a strong reward, the beast was unable to be stopped. The depiction of this creature and its actions are similar to how some view what might be called reptilian archons, right, here on the planet. Well, oddly, the story of the beast seems to enjoy eating shepherdesses, which links to the Poussin paintings. So the myth goes that on his return from the crusade, the Lord of Perilos learned of the beast. He chased the monster with a frightening weapon he brought back from Palestine, a crossbow. So the first question to ask is why it's important to note that he chased the creature with a special weapon brought from the Holy Land. Simply a magic sword would have been good enough in a mythological fairy tale. But then we look into the story. The Lord took with him 3 dogs and 3 servants, and they shot the beast 3 times to deadly wound the animal where it hid in the earth. 3 more days were necessary for the Lord of Perilos to arrive into a deep pit where he cut away 3 gigantic bones as trophies of his victory. Now there's no need, of course, to see the hermetic number 3 repeating itself in every single detail. And of course, there's a connection right away to the biblical story of St. George and the dragon, as well as the Egyptian myth of Ra battling the serpent Apop. And when you look at the work that Conspiracy R Us has done, and a few others has done on this idea that St. George and the myth is representing sort of we'll call it a return of this 1,000-year reign of Christ. I don't want to necessarily label it that way, but we'll call it some sort of unique revival or unique golden age period that the St. George might be representing by overturning the serpent, the parasitic force that's invaded this reality, brings this area of Perilos and this myth even greater to the surface. So there may be a reason that the beast in the story has many often been compared to Satan in its depiction, and it's odd to note that the postal code of Parallos is 66600. And again, that's probably not by accident. And the village of Rivesaltas still holds a festival commemorating this story during August. The beast arrives at 11 o'clock along with the giant Trencavant and his wife Radegonda. Eventually come some symbolic knights on a horse, a catapult, and a forge, and eventually, which of course, eventually the normal things associated with the parade, from jugglers to marching bands and whatever. But by night comes, the structure gets sacrificed in a fire, symbolizing its destruction. And recall that Sauniere, when he died, his final words, which are either true or part of the myth, are claimed to have been John 23. And some suggest this meant John chapter 23, while others feel it's reference to the chapter of Revelation about the apocalypse, written by a John. So if you read as chapter 20, verse 3 of Revelation, he threw him into the abyss and locked and sealed it over him, to keep him from deceiving the nations any more, until 1,000 years had ended. After that, he would be set free for a short time. And I wonder, given the time frame of Sauniere, and what's going on, and with the World's Fairs, and that really the World's Fairs are the starting point of this period of time, this post 1850 period of really our world, our really screwed up reality, our really screwed up structures and organizations and background comes from this time. I wonder if Sauniere was kind of saying that he figured out, hey, somewhere in his understanding, he knew where the beast had been, and the beast had been released. I don't think Sauniere, if that's true, I don't think Sauniere's saying he did it. Like, I don't think he dug up the space and released it. I think it was released long before that, but I think he's saying that he knows where it was, and he knows what had been released, which kind of makes sense to our area. Let's go to Lyon. And Lyon is very interesting. It's a city quite a bit of ways from Renne-le-Chateau, but in the area. But there, a bookshop had bought all of Sauniere's massive library, and Sauniere had a huge library. And why would a bookseller in Lyon buy it? There were a number of books when the bookseller went out of business that had a small little sticker on the inside that said Francois Béranger Sauniere, priest of Aude, town of Renne. So they are the ones who had his books. And when this Perilos group wanted to investigate why would his books wind up in Lyon, because he's not supposed to have had any interactions in Lyon, they found that in 1899 there were documents relating that he was there, ordering all sorts of coaches and rides all over the countryside, although with no reason of why he was going to any of the locations, but also that he was requesting to buy very expensive camera equipment, including one that had binocular telescopes. And there was a response from the supplier saying that what you're asking for is very unique. It's going to have to be specially ordered. So why does Sauniere need some of the world's best photographic equipment when it seems like he's renovating a church and building towers and building, Villa Bethania? What's he need all this equipment for? And it links to possibly the 33, yes, the Freemasonic number, the 33 postcards that he made, that he put out in 1907, which a lot of people claim are clues to the mystery, that he put clues in these photographs and he needed the best photographs available in order to document something. Now, when you look at I've looked at all the postcards, and they don't necessarily seem that out of the ordinary. They're very interesting, of course, because we get a snapshot of the area of Renne-le-Chateau, the church, the village, the building projects, right at the time of Sauniere. Without them, we would have very little detailed info, and it's great to see pictures of him and Marie and etc. But there's nothing that I have been able to track down anyway that indicates there's a hidden key or a hidden message in those postcards. But that doesn't mean there isn't. It just means I haven't found it yet. And if you go to who has them on their site, somebody has them all posted. But if you look up Sauniere postcards, Renne-le-Chateau, they'll come up, and you can look at the 33, and so, like you'll say, some are just it's just a picture of a building or a picture of a forest or a picture of a wall. Others, though, give maybe an indication that something is quite unique there. However, what is close to Lyon that's interesting is the area of La Pilat. And La Pilat, sorry, I have to jump around in my notes a little bit to get everything for you, so hence the slight starting and stopping. La Pilat is on an ancient road that clings to a chapel dedicated to the Magdalene. The road starts in the village of Malival, whose church contains identical statues of Anthony of Padua and Saint Germain, as you find in Renne-le-Chateau. It passes a chapel of Saint Anthony the Hermit, who has another statue in Renne-le-Chateau. And in the Magdalene Chapel is a altar with almost the exact same tableau painting of her in the grotto that Sauniere did for his altar in Renne-le-Chateau. What's really, really interesting, of course, is that in one of the paintings the holy balm is there, the ointment, and one it's not there. So they're not exactly the same, but they're similar enough to see that they're pretty close to the same. So the Perilos group is the one who had gone out and found this. Like or dislike Andre Doucet, his group has done some really interesting research and really dug into some really interesting areas here. So they're the ones who found this altar painting in this church in La Pilat, posted on their website. Within a month, in January 2001, the painting was stolen. Thieves broke in from the roof of the church and stole only the painting. So not the frame. It's not like they took the whole thing off. They just took the painting. They left the frame. They left the altar. There were some very expensive things in the church that could have been stolen if they were thieves looking to make money off something. All they took was the painting. And so obviously there was something in the painting that somebody did not want researchers to look into anymore. Now, not mentioned by the group at the time in the article, when they posted on their website, they just posted briefly information about this painting. They didn't go into any detail. Now, thankfully, they had taken a lot of high-resolution photographs for further analysis, and that was really important because when they looked at them carefully, they maybe came up with a reason for the theft, and that was what was on the back of the painting, for there were some inscriptions. And it begins with 3 names, all local people, hermetic number 3 again, and then a sentence is found. JM, Jaru, Marmumet, JM minus MM plus SA minus PPN. Underneath it was an inscription. Je suis Venus BS Pret. I came, BS, priest. Okay, so the BS priest could mean anyone. But it's odd that the very painting that Sauniere painted on his altar, it's highly speculative that the BS is Sauniere marking himself on the back of the painting. Why, it's not known, and why he would need to mark it or have anything to do with it is not known. Since the theft, there is a new painting in the altar, and it's claimed to be an exact copy, but that's not at all the case, as so much in the new painting is missing from the old one. There's the mountain that looked exactly like La Pilat in the background, certain words on the text are gone, and of course all the inscriptions on the back aren't going to be there anymore. And this is a really good example that without the dedicated researchers who've been looking into whatever it is we're looking into and documenting it while everything is left of the mystery, all of it might be disappearing. And it begs the question, what more is out there that may have been removed or disappeared? And in the talk I did recently with Jay Widener on is this a simulation, and we were talking about our reality and how things have been going lately, and the world lockdown, which of course is coming right within like the last 3 or 4 years, is where this examination of more recent history has really exploded, right? Not just on the world fairs, but any of the buildings and the ideas and projects and mud flood and whatever you want to talk about. And it's been really interesting that as the research is getting more and as more and more people are wanting to get out there and study buildings and places and libraries and documents up close, the world's been shut down so that nobody can go anywhere, nobody can see anything, or it's really, really difficult to get to places now to document unless you live in that area. So, and I think that's a part of what's been going on is they're not just keeping people away from doing direct on research, it's giving them time, the groups in charge, to hide what they need to hide, to remove what they need to remove, so that eventually when things maybe open up to the world again and people can travel back, the things we needed to find that would be key clues in uncovering what's been going on aren't there. And we don't know they're not there because we weren't documenting it from a time when we could see it. So the more we can document, the more we can photograph, the more we can look into, the better. So that's Lyon. I need to talk, I guess, a bit about Mount Bugarch. And quite simply, Mount Bugarch is a famous mountain. It's south of Renne-le-Chateau. It's claimed to be a place of UFO sightings, of very strange magnetic anomalies, missing persons, almost like its own little Bermuda Triangle. There was a researcher, what was her name? Writer Elizabeth Van Buren, I think was her name. Anyway, she claimed that in 2012, this is where the spaceships were going to land and save everybody from the 2012 changeover, and there was a whole wild scenario around the winter solstice of 2012 at Bugarch. But what I want to instead look into Mount Bugarch in the story is the famous author Jules Verne. The author, of course, of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is a hermetic novel. It's a really deep wisdom novel, similar to Moby Dick. It's not about a guy chasing whales. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is not about some submarine captain, right? It's about the search for the self. Remember Captain Nemo in the story. Nemo means nobody. It's a very important clue to what Jules Verne is writing. But Jules Verne's connection to Renne-le-Chateau comes from his novel Clovis d'Ardenter, Clovis being the first Merovingian king. And a key figure in the novel is Captain Bugarch, which of course relates to the mountain, Mount Bugarch. Verne writes of Captain Bugarch's ruined castles, which has the shape of a ship with 3 bridges. 3, again, the hermetic number. A key place in the story is Bain de Renne, the original name of Renne-le-Chateau, of which Verne says the waters smell like sulfur, which they do in the Terme pools. So why did Jules Verne want to write a novel about this area in 1896, at the very time the building projects of Sauniere and the work of Boudet are in full swing? Interestingly, Verne is buried in the cemetery in Amiens, and in front of his tomb is a sculpture of someone escaping the grave and reaching a hand to the sky, thus has a similar theme to what is written on Poussin's tomb. Verne's tomb is also in the corner and situated exactly on the original Paris rose line. Also remember, a little piece of information, in 1832, a French historian, Jean-Pierre Rochefort, published Voyages au Renne-le-Chateau, where he compares the landscape of Renne area to Arcadia. Richard Wagner is supposed to have made a stop at Renne-le-Chateau before writing his last opera in 1832. So whatever the secret is, it's obviously several writers and artists have been visiting and writing and presenting it for a long time before there was any guy named Béranger Sauniere doing things at the village. So just pointing that out. Okay, we've gone to Coma. We've done Perilos. We move on to Girona. This might be one of the strangest potentials of the story. I don't know how much to believe this part of it, but I have to present it because it's like anything. You can't discard it as untrue until you know for sure it's untrue. But there's a link to this story to the Spanish city of Gerona to the south, a city which was found to have a very odd tower, the Torre Magdala, that turned out to be almost an exact replica to exact dimensions of Sauniere's Tour Magdala. So we've got 2 Magdala towers in these 2 towns that are almost exact. And since the Spanish tower was built in the 1850s, it's quite easy to speculate that Sauniere may have copied it. Now remember, the word Magdala, which links to the Magdalene, is a word that also in Old Hebrew means tower or towering. So it's a clue that perhaps the woman known as the Magdalene was not maybe from a particular place. She may have been named that because she was tall, because she stood out in a crowd, or because she was considered towering above the rest. She was considered higher than the rest. It's claimed, now I have to be careful, I have not there's documents that I'm going to be mentioning that are claiming things about Sauniere's connection to this town. I have not seen the documents firsthand. I've seen some, of course, photographs of the documents claiming that what I'm saying here is correct. I can't. I'm just presenting the information as it's presented by other researchers. Somebody will have to go and verify the documents themselves in Spain if you want to guarantee the truth to this part of the story. But there claims to be letters from Sauniere with a French woman living in Girona named Maria Tudor. And it's speculated that Sauniere and his historian Ernest Cross actually brought her to Girona, that she was in Girona because Sauniere brought her there. It's claimed that he visited her weekly for a period of time. And in fact, there were rumors that they were a child from their interactions. Sauniere's letters to her apparently tend to be quite formal, while letters of hers to others, because they have apparently her letters, and they talk of how much she misses him when he's gone. Thus, it seems like Sauniere has a lot of women on the go, and all named Marie, and in different locations. Sauniere seemed to also be involved in an esoteric group in Girona, and wrote several letters to the members there. In one letter, he claims to have written, again, it's claimed he wrote, "They showed it to me. I laid my hand on it. I made it work. I am holding it firmly." Another letter from a grandfather to his grandson in the group is claimed to read, "Sauniere went too far. The ritual did not belong to the church. He may have started in good faith, but he must have done something wrong. Look how he ended up. If ancient Egypt kept a secret, there may have been a good reason." All these stories came out from a woman named Patrice Chaplin, the granddaughter of movie star Charlie Chaplin, who lived in this town in the 1960s and 70s, and whose book claims that all of the Sauniere stories and all the Sauniere stories all about time travel, and that the two towers were created to produce a massive energy field that hits a vortex in the middle of these two towers, which would be Mount Canigou. And at the top of this mountain is an isolated monastery, which is linked to all the time travel work. Of course, Chaplin's story, while potentially coming just from a New Age type of personal fantasy, does link to some interesting oddities about the location to indicate something is probably happening in this town too. And if he was definitely visiting and interacting with a young French woman who lived in the specific house with the tower. It's not like she lived in the town. She lived in the house that had the tower, so she was like connected to it. He kept up these interactions with the Spanish esoteric group. But the house where the tower and the woman stayed was purchased by local officials in 1962 and then was completely destroyed. Just like what happened at the Coma estate, right? All that remains now is the garden and the wall. Everything else is only to be found in photographs. One rumor surrounding the 1950s is that a group came from Spain to visit the mayor of Renne-le-Chateau in 1955, asking what Sauniere or asking what Corbu was up to in the town. So this is again a claim that officials from this Spanish town went to see what Sauniere or what Corbu was doing in Renne-le-Chateau. And when they were told he was looking to advertise a gold treasure story, they just left immediately with no further questions. So why did the officials in Girona want to destroy the house and the tower in 1962, just as people like Gerard de Sade and Plantard and those were beginning their research and wanting to publish a book on the Renne-le-Chateau mystery? Maria was, in a sense, in possession of the house, first by ownership, and she had a stipulation that she would be allowed to live there, very similar to the arrangement that Marie Denarnaud had made with Corbu. The second owner turned out to be the man she married. So she was in possession of the house well into the 1950s until she moved to Paris. And it's visited that this woman, Marie Tudor, was visited quite often by Gerard de Sade in 1962, and that she's the one who gave him a key amount of the information, which later turned into the myth of his book on Renne-le-Chateau. Again, this placement of her in Girona, again, is claimed that it all comes from Sauniere, that it's Sauniere who brought her there, and she was there to look after the house and the estate and the tower, much as Marie's job was to look after the estate and the tower and what else in Renne when he was gone. So also, what is the connection between the two women with the similar names? Could they have been sisters or somehow related? Could they be each other's clone? I know these are all wild things to think about, but in a story like this, who knows? Why did he need to have both estates? Why did he need to have control of both towers? And why did he need to have women at the estates to look after the same places? So Chaplin's book also contains an odd note, supposedly from Sauniere, which is on a page of letters in the shape of a pyramid, and on the other, the names of Seth, Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys. And they're written in such an order so that they would be Set, Isis, Osiris, Nephthys, and that would be Sion. And the note reads, I know Zion. That's meaning that the word Sion, which appears in this story all over the place, right, the Priory of Zion, is perhaps the 4 Egyptian deities. Once again, we have ancient Egypt related to Sauniere in this story. Wow, I only got through half of the stuff I had planned to get through. So I'm going to stop this at 40 minutes. We have some really great stuff I haven't got to yet. The site of Ariage, which is really interesting. Montreal de Sauce and its Grail Cave, the Coisa War Memorial, the Paris Cave. But I'm going to have to put that in another video. We've hit 40 minutes, and I think that's good enough for one new installment. So yeah, that's where we'll leave it for today. Thanks for waiting 2 months for another installment of the Southern France Mystery, and hope this gives you some more ideas of, again, I'm not saying anything I've presented here is 100% factual or 100% the truth or guaranteed what's going on, but at least it's another start of digging information and seeing the strangeness of this story. So we'll see you coming up in the future. Again, tomorrow I'll do the channel recommendation and get to some other things in the next few weeks, and maybe by later in the month we'll have the rest of this group of surrounding Renne-le-Chateau stuff that I haven't got to. Thanks for following along, even though I've been kind of busy with life things for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and of course for your buying of the books and making donations and just generally encouraging and supporting the work and being a part of what we're doing here, because really this channel is just about my sharing what I've come across and where my research and life story has taken me, with the hope that others who've done similar things are able to put together their stuff and share their stuff, and as a group we can somehow piece together these individual parts, put them all together into one whole, and maybe we get to some kind of truth that way. So thanks again, and we'll see you shortly. Cheers.